Alexander's Feast or the Power of Music by John Dryden (1631 to 1700). A song in honor of Saint Cecilia's Day, 1697. The poem is continued. Saint Cecilia, a Roman virgin and martyr, 230 AD, is traditionally the patron saint of music and the inventor of the organ. Dryden's poem Alexander's Feast is written in celebration of Saint Cecilia's Day on 22nd November 1697. The poem opens with Alexander the Great, son of Philip, king of Macedon, seated along with Thais, the young and lovely Athenian courtesan, enjoying the banquet in the Persian city Persepolis in celebration of his victory over the Persian king Darius III in 331 BC. We are introduced to the court musician Timotheus with his lyre and then told that Alexander was in fact the son of Jove, king of the gods and Olympia. Thus the sovereign of the world begot the conqueror of the world. Timotheus sings in praise of Bacchus, and the scene is filled with drunken revelry. Since drinking is the sweet pleasure of the soldier, Alexander grows in vain and fights all his battles again in his mind. Seeing the madness in Alexander's eyes, Timotheus changes his song into one designed to create a mood of pity. He sings of the fall of Darius, the Persian king, who was great and good, but was deserted by his own followers, and his slain body left exposed to bare earth. The joy of victory evaporates from Alexander, and he sighs and starts shedding tears. Pity prepares the mind for love, and love is the subject of Timotheus' next song. Alexander gazes at the fair lady Thais and sighs. Finally, oppressed with wine and love, the vanquished hero sinks upon Thais' breast. Timotheus now shifts the music to a louder strain and rouses a sleeping Alexander to action. "Revenge!" cries Timotheus. The ghosts of the Greek soldiers slain in the battle cry out for revenge. The music fires Alexander with a great zeal to destroy. Thais leads Alexander to burn Persepolis. In this, she is like Helen, whose passion for the Trojan prince Paris resulted in the Greeks burning Troy. At last came Saint Cecilia, inventor of the organ. Inspired by God, she enlarges the bounds of music by adding length to musical notes. Cecilia is superior to Timotheus, Dryden declares. Old Timotheus should yield the prize to her, or at least divide the crown. He raised a mortal to the skies, she drew an angel down. Timotheus raised Alexander to the skies, creating in the king's mind the delusion of divine status. But Cecilia's music brought an angel down from heaven. In Alexander's feast, music is shown to have a mighty range of influence. Timotheus draws his master Alexander to varying moods: pride, bacchanalian revelry, martial zeal, pity, love, and religious devotion. The rhythms and sounds in the refrains of each stanza echo the hero's changing emotions. Alexander's Feast, or The Power of Music, An ode in honor of Saint Cecilia's Day is Dryden's second ode honoring Saint Cecilia, the patron saint of music. The poem's theme, the power of music to move human emotions, is identical with that of A Song for Saint Cecilia's Day, written a decade earlier. Both odes are occasional, having been composed at the invitation of the London Musical Society. The second ode, however, is much more elaborate, for Dryden introduces characters and places them within a dramatic setting. The Greeks are celebrating their victory over the Persian king Darius when the musician at the banquet Timotheus is called upon to perform. With exalted strains, Timotheus creates within Alexander the Great a sense that he has become a deity. An alteration of tone changes his mood to a desire for pleasure, and following this, a longing for love of his mistress Thais, who sits beside him. Somber strains evoke pity for the fallen Darius, but these are followed by strident tones calling for revenge on behalf of Greek soldiers who have perished. Alexander and his mistress and their company rush out, torches in hand, to burn the Persian city Persepolis. The poem concludes with a grand chorus stressing the power of music to move emotions and contrasting the legend of Saint Cecilia with the power of Timotheus. Dryden recalls the story that after she had invented the organ, she played such beautiful music that an angel, mistaking the sounds for those of heaven, appeared as she played. Let old Timotheus yield the prize, or both divide the crown. He raised a mortal to the skies, she drew an angel down. The intricate form resembles the Pindaric ode in its lengthy and complicated irregular stanzas, yet its linear organization follows the tradition of Horace. Dryden achieves a complex, forceful, and energetic movement, and his use of historical events and characters contribute to a lively dramatic expression of his theme. This is an ode to the emotive power of music, and presumably a commemoration of some event on this festival day of music's patron saint. It reimagines the Genesis account as an act of melodic conception, perhaps drawing on Milton's famous invocation to Paradise Lost. The later stanzas can be seen to carry this biblical metaphor through Christian history until the grand chorus, where music heralds the apocalypse. Intricate rhyme scheme and mirroring lines, together with varied line lengths, create a frame and strive for a lyrical effect. The opening stanza sees music as an aspect or incarnation of divinity in self-begetting Genesis. The lyric, flowing rhythm of the first line with two harmonizing dactyls at the end set the tone. This ode has the grandeur of a hymn and the playfulness of a folk song. The universal frame likens nature to an instrument that requires assembling. Its constituent parts, the elements, cold and hot, the moist and dry. Yet it is music itself, the tuneful voice, that sets in motion this genesis. Consequently, music, personified with its own power, is seen as an expression of a self-begetting God. Nature then comes to represent the musical scale, which Dryden likens to the chain of being. Just as man is created on the final day of creation, so Dryden's Genesis account ends in this stanza with mankind as the note which completes the scale. Stanza structures throughout the poem are suggestive of the forms and frames of musical instruments. In the opening stanza, the longer pentameter and tetrameter lines cut across the shorter to mimic the chords or strings of an organ or lute. The repeated line, from heavenly harmony, might represent the same note in a scale struck again. The second stanza certainly aims to mimic the completeness of the compass of the notes, returning to its opening line to suggest the circles of fifths or other mathematical sequences that were being applied in music at this time. Alternating line lengths also try to convey a lyrical feel. As much as is possible for an Augustan poet whose strength is in grandeur, solidity, and rhetoric. The rich rhymes on shell are not intrusive as they might be, but produce exactly this grand kind of effect which seems to work against the lyricism. A major theme in the poem is music's ability to play on human emotions, something reflected by Dryden's sounding of various emotions as if they were notes in a scale. The range moves from anger and courage in stanza 3 to jealousy in 5 and worship in 6. Each is associated with an instrument, and Dryden's word choices mimic the sound of each with varying success. The trumpet is evoked well by clangor, which has a resounding metallic sound but also warmth. The repetition of double for the drum doesn't quite come off, sounding out of place where two repetitions would have conveyed the message better. Perhaps the line works once set to music. Music's divine beginnings in stanza 1 work to suggest that music not only inspires humanity but provides a link with heaven. This is suggested in stanza 7 with Cecilia's summoning of an angel with an organ. However, music is also seen as a force of destruction in the poem, fanning the flames of jealousy and heralding judgment. The listening brethren that worship the music of Jubal need not be committing idolatry. They worship the same divine music that represents and is God in stanza 1. However, the suggestion that music's power to manipulate can be abused is shown first here, with the hollow of that shell that spoke so sweetly and so well. Of course, shells do make a sound because they are hollow, but the word also acts in its pejorative mood to suggest the seductive, misleading rhetoric of a politician. Likewise, music inspires wars with the thundering drum and the pains of unrequited love. The poem gently and unobtrusively reminds us that when music is a human rather than divine tool, it can be misused. Hence, finally, in the grand chorus, the divine trumpet also brings about justice. The enjambment over So when the last and dreadful hour this crumbling pageant shall devour creates a speed of delivery that echoes the cataclysmic devouring of the world. The second line here seems to me to have a satirical bite to it, suggesting that elevated art and abstracts like music will outlive and shed unfavorable light on the crumbling pageant of our lives. The final triplet is beautiful, echoing the cadence of Revelation and bringing us full circle to the tuneful voice of stanza 1. The poem is a grand but playful ode to music, celebrating art's power to affect us, but also imposing a moral framework just as it imposes a universal frame on its stanzas. Music can be both a route to heaven and a herald of destruction. Alexander's Feast or the Power of Music, 1697, is an ode by John Dryden. It was written to celebrate Saint Cecilia's. Jeremiah Clarke said the original ode to music, however, the score is now lost. The main body of the poem describes the feast given by Alexander the Great at the Persian capital Persepolis after his defeat of Darius. Alexander's bard Timotheus sings praises of him. Alexander's emotions are manipulated by the singer's poetry and music. Timotheus glorifies him as a god, puffing up Alexander's pride. He then sings of the pleasures of wine, encouraging Alexander to drink. Seeing Alexander becoming too boisterous, he sings of the sad death of Darius. The king becomes quiet. He then lauds the beauty of Thais, Alexander's lover, making the king's heart melt. Finally, he encourages feelings of anger and vengeance, causing Thais and Alexander to burn down the Persian palace in revenge for Persia's previous outrages against Greece. The poem then moves ahead in time to describe Saint Cecilia, inventress of the vocal frame, who is traditionally supposed to have created the first organ and to have instituted Christian sacred music. The poem concludes that while Timotheus raised a mortal to the skies, she drew an angel down. George Frederick Handel composed a choral work also called Alexander's Feast, set to a libretto by Newburgh Hamilton, which was closely based on the ode by Dryden.